There's breaking news. At any moment, President Donald Trump will award the highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor, to 3 veterans. The Medal of Honor was originally authorized in 1861 for the Navy and in 1862 is authorized for the Army. The 3 recipients today of this highest honor are Major James Capers, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps retired, Colonel John W. Ripley, U.S. Marine Corps retired, and Major Nicholas Dockery, U.S. Army retired. We're going to take you live to the White House when that event begins. And talk about chaos. Streets closed, lines of thousands of people forming at 3 a.m. and people calling out of work. What am I talking about? The New York Knicks parade, of course. The team celebrated their NBA championship and the parade shut down all of lower Manhattan. More on that spectacular parade this hour. And also today, Vice President J.D. Vance returned to the White House briefing room. This time, it was to discuss the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran that President Trump signed last night in France.
Have a little bit of faith in the President of the United States. The idea that he is going to strike a deal that's been bad for the American people, it's preposterous.
More on that in just a moment. And soccer fans from all over the world are in the United States to support their teams. And I do think it's fair to say they are loving the U.S.
I had Texas barbecue yesterday. I had a lovely bit of brisket. Melted in my mouth. It was absolutely beautiful. It's the best beef I've had in my life.
Hear more from those fans later this hour. I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. Well, it's signed. Last night, before President Donald Trump hopped on Air Force One to depart France, he signed the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran. And today, Vice President J.D. Vance gave us a few details regarding the memorandum.
The Obama nuclear deal allowed enrichment. Ours will not. The Obama deal allowed the accumulation of stockpiled weapons-grade material. Ours is actually leading to the destruction of that stockpile of enriched material. So there are many differences. The Obama deal gave them over $1 billion of American money. This deal gives them $0 of American money. So a lot of substantive differences, but I think the most important differences are where we're coming at it from a position of strength and the fact that our Gulf Coast partners love this deal.
Tonight, Vice President Vance was supposed to be heading to Switzerland, but the administration delayed his trip.
I plan to go to Switzerland. Exactly when, we think these technical negotiations are going to start sometime this weekend. That's still the plan, but that could change because it's not an easy country, Iran, to get out of, and so we're trying to figure out exactly when that's going to happen. I suspect this weekend, but I'm not sure.
And before the Vice President wrapped up his press briefing today, he had a few words for Israel.
Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
Former Pennsylvania U.S. Senator Rick Santorum joins us. Nice to see you, sir.
Good to be with you, Greta.
He was asked about, Vice President Vance was asked about the difference between the Obama deal and this deal, and he gave two things. One is he said that there was enrichment allowed under Obama, none here. And as I recall, correct me if I'm right, there was enrichment allowed for health, for safety reasons, not for weapons back under the Obama. So that was the enrichment that was allowed.
Well, they allowed enrichment to continue. They allowed the stockpile to continue.
To what enrichment? I mean, because it's a big difference between enrichment levels for a nuclear weapon and enrichment for nuclear medicine and for power.
Yeah. Except that Iran doesn't need nuclear power. They have huge amounts of energy. That it was a facade, and everybody knew it was a facade. They wanted to keep their centrifuges and everything in place, and Obama let them keep it in place. And it was like a 10-year deal. And then after that, then they could start doing other things. The biggest difference, and this, it wasn't in the clip, but this is what the vice president said. He's absolutely right. All of the nuclear program, when the JCPOA, the Obama deal, was in place, all of it was in place. They dismantled none of it. None of it was called to be dismantled. In the case of Trump, it's all been blown up. It's all been destroyed. The fissile material is buried under a mountain of debris. So that's the biggest difference.
But that has to do with the last year attack in Iran. So
that's correct.
If that was done last June, why in the world did we go in on February 28th? Because it seemed like what provoked the February 28th military action where we are right now is that there were protests in Iran in January when anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000 people were eliminated by the regime. They were shot down. And then all of a sudden it became the nuclear issue, but supposedly 8 months earlier in June, that was all destroyed.
Well, a big chunk of it was destroyed, number one. But the other aspect was they were still committed to going to their nuclear program. They were still on track to try to rebuild the nuclear program. They had not learned their lesson from that. They were developing, as we saw, additional missile capability. That one of the missiles that they fired during the conflict hit Diego Garcia, which means that that missile could have actually reached London, for example. So this was a regime that was still committed to the path of destroying the great Satan, the United States, and the little Satan, Israel, and that's why the president decided to act.
Well, back in about 2004, I was in the Middle East following President Bush. I had an interview with him, and we were on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. And I remember looking across, and I said to him, you know, why is the U.S. allowing Iran to have any nuclear weapons? He said then to me, he said, they need some enrichment for medical and power. And I said, power? They got all this oil.
Yeah.
And he said, no. Was he wrong?
I think he was. Look, a lot of presidents, including Bush, didn't want to deal with the problem. And they all said the same thing, from George Bush, 41, 45, Clinton, Obama, Biden. They all said Iran can't get a nuclear weapon. And there's a reason for that, because Iran is a theocracy that believes that their end of times Messiah coming back comes about with a nuclear, well, not a nuclear, but a conflagration, a huge global war. You don't want a country whose end game is to create a global conflict, the ability to have a nuclear weapon. Every president knew that. Every president said they can't get it. And they all were looking for reasons not to go after them, because they didn't want to do what Trump did, because there's a risk, and you're seeing the risk involved with going after it.
Well, Iran are a bunch of liars. We know that historically. They're liars, they're cheaters, and everything else. We got that. The regime, maybe not the people of the regime. Have we abandoned our pals in some way in Israel? Is Netanyahu, is the Trump administration treating Netanyahu fairly?
I think he's strong-arming Netanyahu and asking him what we wouldn't ask of any other ally, which is, he says, oh, you know, he has a right to defend themselves, but don't defend yourself. I mean, he said that many times in the last few weeks, where Hezbollah continues to fire rockets, even today.
Paid for by Iran.
Paid for by Iran, continue to fire rockets into Israel, and then saying, you know, okay, they didn't get through, therefore don't respond. Well, if someone shoots, I mean, someone shot at the president, it didn't kill him, don't respond. That's just not a rational thing for anybody or any country to do. If someone's trying to kill your people, whether they're successful or not, they still tried, and you have an obligation to respond to make sure they don't do it again. And so I think what the president, I understand what the president's trying to do. He doesn't want to mess up the negotiations, and having Israel and Hezbollah fighting each other is a problem for that negotiation. But I think putting that kind of pressure on Israel is just not right.
Well, that's not the only fight. There's a huge schism now in the Republican Party. You've got one faction is as mad as can be at Trump, and it said he's not MAGA anymore. He said no more wars, no interventions, and then you've got the Trump side. I mean, the Republican Party appears to have a lot of. I mean, you have a lot of problems.
Well, I think what you're seeing in this agreement is the never wars, no more wars crowd actually won this round, because I think it was J.D. Vance and others who are sort of part of that MAGA coalition, if you will, who really pushed for this agreement. I think that's why J.D. Vance is out there selling the agreement, because I think he was the impetus and that faction of MAGA, and they're in the White House. I mean, they were the ones who really pushed this, and I think what they said was to the president, we've got to have an agreement. We've got to take a pause. We've got to get oil prices down, or you're going to lose the midterm, and they're going to impeach you, and they're going to go. So I think he agreed to do that. but he said, okay, I'm going to agree to do this. I'm going to send you out to sell it because you sort of pushed me to do this. You go out and sell it.
Well, in order to win the midterms, though, in November, he needs both sides of this dispute within the Republican Party to win. They got to get out and vote.
Well, look, the best way I can look at this agreement is this is a strategic pause. It gives the oil stockpiles an opportunity to be replenished. It lowers gas prices. It takes the heat off. There is a legitimate question as to who is running Iran right now and who we're really negotiating with. Are these people who are saying that they're agreeing to do these things, will they be able to follow through? So it does create an opportunity for us to get a little better. I mean, we can increase our stockpiles of weapons again.
So can they.
It's not a bad idea. And I think the vice president, did a good job today of laying out that this is a temporary thing. It's all going to be based on whether Iran, in fact, does do what they say they're going to do. And if they don't, we can resume the activities that we had before, which is the blockade and bombing and the like.
All right. Well, so if that one faction of the Republican Party within the White House, J.D. Vance and others, they don't want the foreign wars. They don't want war. Well, where were they on February 27th? Before we went there? Why is it that, and then the other question I have is if we didn't know the level, if we didn't destroy as much as we expected last June, where in the world is our intel? Because you've got the Israeli intel who managed to kill all these people using their pagers, the most sophisticated stuff I've ever seen a couple years earlier, all these terrorists, yet we can't figure out what we got last June, and we have to then re-go in February?
Well, I think they did an effective job last June, but there is more to do. Look, Iran's a huge country. It's 90 million people. It's an enormous country.
Well, then there shouldn't have been there was the impression that we really got something last June.
I think they did. I mean, did they completely eliminate the nuclear program? As Trump is known for his hyperbole, he probably overstated the case. But the reality is there was a lot more damage done. And the most important thing that was they tried to accomplish was to degrade their military, which they did in this round, which is their army, their navy, the IRGC, the besieged, the sort of militia groups. They went after all these things to create an atmosphere, an opportunity for there to be a change in leadership or potentially a revolution. That was sort of the next step in the process, which I think was actually very successful, but the regime has been able to hold on.
We didn't realize how many levels the regime was. I am hoping that, that our intelligence worked a whole lot better, and they just can't admit to what they know and didn't know because, that I'm hoping that they really do know how much when they do something like this Iran activity last June, and that they can't tell us that, well, we got this much but not that much or something, because I think we were misled on how much we devastated Iran.
Well, as I said before, I mean, the president can overstate things, and I think he probably did overstate what they accomplished, but they certainly got the rest of that nuclear program. They dramatically attrited their missile program. Again, all of the other military assets, without question, this is what J.D. Vance was saying. This is a weakened Iran. And 60 days...
Is it a weakened U.S.?
No.
Okay, good.
No. 60 days of a pause they're not going to all of a sudden bounce back and be just as strong as they were a year ago. This is going to be a decade for them to recover for what happened here. And I think 60 days is a reasonable time to see whether they can work out some sort of deal.
All right, well, I hope you don't interpret my questions as saying that I'm not rooting for this memorandum of understanding, because I'm rooting for its success.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it, but I'm rooting for success and giving it every chance.
Yeah, no, I'll give a chance too. Anyway, Senator Rick Santorum, nice to see you.
Pleasure.
And today, U.S. Central Command took to X and posted, quote, "Today, U.S. forces lifted the blockade on all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports and coastal areas in accordance with the president's direction. American forces are not impeding the transit of vessels to or from Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf or Gulf of Oman. All U.S. military blockade enforcement efforts have ceased. Our great naval ships will remain in the general area to make sure that all aspects of the agreement are adhered to, obeyed, and in full force and effect," end quote. Coming up, if you wanted to commit a crime in New York City, today may have been a really good day to do it. I'll explain when the record continues.
Every day, bumps and bangs happen. Bruises are optional. Use daily dermatologist-recommended Dermend and reduce the appearance of bruises. Get Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream in the first aid aisle.
There's a reason the wealthy don't keep all their money in one place. We work hard our entire lives to build wealth for retirement. If your retirement dropped 30% tomorrow, would you be ready? Or would you just have to wait and hope it comes back? The last thing any of us wants is to watch our retirement accounts shrink every time Wall Street panics, the dollar drops, or global uncertainty rises. That's why so many successful Americans turn to gold to help protect their retirement. And Preserve Gold is the only precious metals company I trust and recommend. Let me be frank, gold is not for everybody. And I do not give financial advice, but I do urge you to get my free wealth protection guide from Preserve Gold and learn about a special offer to receive up to $20,000 in free gold and silver. Education is power.
Text Newsmax to 50505.
Your mouthwash routine just got a whole lot smarter. Use Smart Mouth Activated Morning Mouthwash with B12 for all-day bad breath prevention, guaranteed. If your mouthwash isn't activated, it's not Smart Mouth. Kickstart your morning. Get Smart Mouth Activated Mouthwash with B12.
Knicks and 5! Not out here, baby! 5! And we going to roll! And we bring the chip home! That's what we do! Knicks and 5!
53 long years. That's how long the New York Knicks waited for today, their ticker tape championship parade. This is their first title since 1973. Millions attended today's parade. Viewing pens, where fans are corralled for security purposes, opened at 6 a.m., and fans were there hours before 6 a.m., waiting to get into the viewing pens. Not everyone could get in as the parade reached capacity. Fans did whatever they could to get even a glimpse of the parade. These people climbed a sanitation truck. Others climbed scaffolding. More than 10,000 NYPD officers worked the event. That's the largest police deployment for a single event in New York City's history. Here's what some of the teams said.
New York, we really did it, man. We really did it. Wouldn't trade this for a world. And lastly, there's a lot of people that have a lot of negative stuff to say. There's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions. But when you prove them wrong, you really don't have to say to them.
Let's go one time. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? I love you, New York.
This is not the last stop for the NBA champs. The Knicks owner says the team will be going to the White House. Host of the Sage Steele podcast, Sage Steele joins me. Nice to see you again. It's been a while.
It's been a long time, Greta. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. Okay, I'm going to put you in sort of a spot. Which sport, soccer or NBA, where you've got a long history of covering sports, would you prefer to cover if you could only cover one, and why?
You are totally putting me on the spot. Well, I covered about 10 NBA finals and, of course, NBA seasons leading up to that. So I feel like been there, done that. And during the best era, aside from the Jordan era, which I was a little bit a part of that in my younger days, I was there during that Warriors run with the Cavaliers every year for 5-6 years. So that was awesome. I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I have an appreciation for the entire culture. So I would love now to go do that for the World Cup. I can't believe I'm saying that I'm choosing soccer today.
All right, okay, now here's another question. Which do you want to watch most? NFL, which you've covered for so long, soccer, well, obviously I think you've tipped your hand on soccer, or NBA.
No, honestly, I'm a football girl, and I always have been. Like from the beginning of, I was 10, 11 years old when I announced that I wanted to be a sportscaster, and it was because of football. My dad played college football, and I was a Cowboys fan and then a Broncos fan growing up. I know that those are not words that you want to hear, not teams that you want to hear, Greta. But no, listen, this is still a football country. Football, American football, not football, soccer football. So I'll always choose football.
All right, and you mentioned your father. I think, what did he play at West Point?
Yes, good memory. Yes, he actually,
I always
brag about him. 1966, broke the color barrier. First black man to play varsity football ever at Army, and went on to the Hall of Fame there. So he's my why for this whole crazy career.
All right, let's talk. Okay, let's talk football. Let me talk about the Bears for a second. Let me play a soundbite for you about the Bears. They're moving. They may be moving to Indiana, and Brian Urlacher is not happy about the move, and I'm not either, even though I'm not a Bears fan.
I do not like the Bears playing anywhere but Soldier Field. I can't picture them, because even if they went to Arlington Heights, which is in Illinois, they're going to be in a dome. And I think if they go to Indiana, they'll be in a dome. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of them playing in a dome anywhere. I understand financially it makes a ton of sense for them to go to Indiana.
Sage, what do you think about the Bears moving to Indiana?
Yeah, I get it. I was so shocked when I heard the news, and you heard rumblings of it for a long time if you followed it because of the stadium situation. And Urlacher's right. The Chicago Bears, 100 years of pride in the history of that team and that Soldier Field for 50 years. But it should surprise no one. And I know Brian understands the financial aspect of this. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out how poorly run the state of Illinois is from a financial perspective, and the back and forth for all these years. And when Indiana comes in and offers $1 billion in incentives, it's hard to turn that down, even though Bears brass tried and tried. They don't want to leave either, but this is what happens when you run the stadium, or excuse me, the organization in that state as a whole poorly. I think it's fascinating, though, and I think it's the right thing. Nobody wants to change the name. It will remain the Chicago Bears, as it should. And it's only, Hammond, Indiana is only, 20, 30 miles from downtown Chicago. It's no different from the Jets and the Giants playing their football in New Jersey, despite being the New York Jets or Giants. So I think it's really sad, but if it maintains all the logos, all the colors, all the names, then it's, I don't know, I think it's okay. I get it.
All right. Well, as a Packer fan, we hate the Bears, but I'm in and we even have a song about it that's rather crude about the Bears, and I own a share. But the problem, and maybe it's just in my household, is that my husband, who grew up in Baltimore, who is, I don't know, he still hates Indiana for stealing the Colts, and it's been 40 years, and so the whole idea of Indiana once again snatching another team when it's just beyond me that this could happen, and this destroys such a wonderful tradition of the. Why? How much? Did they really lose that much money playing at Soldier Field? How much money do they need?
I look at you. You sound like a socialist here, Greta. You can't say that. How much money does anybody need? No, it is about the stadium. And that is what so many stadiums in all sports have turned into, right? It is more about corporate America and the ability to have suites and sponsorships. And there's billions of dollars involved in that too. I also am like Brian and like you, like at Lambeau Field, which I was honored to have gone there 2 times during my career. I'm old school. You got to be cold. Who needs a dome? That's soft to play on artificial anything, right? Totally the same page. But this is a business. And at the end of the day, if Chicago is going to do it the right way, the property tax is absolutely through the roof. It doesn't make financial sense. And so I think we get our hearts all caught up in it because we're fans first and forget about the business side of it. And it's unfortunate. I think the people in Chicago, and I'm not talking about the fans, I'm talking about government, the governor there and Brandon Johnson, the mayor, et cetera. They were in denial. They didn't think they'd actually pull the trigger on this, but this is what happens when you treat a team poorly. And by the way, tell your husband, I understand in Baltimore being sent or leaving for Indiana, but then the Ravens, who I covered for 6 years, my brother still works for them. Baltimore fans were fine with taking the team from Cleveland, right? So it just depends.
But they changed, but at least, you know what? At least the Ravens left the uniform and the names behind. That was the Ravens, because they took the Cleveland Browns before
Cleveland Browns and Art Modell.
Okay, so
hated leaving.
That's right. Yeah. So at least the Ravens didn't steal the name and the tradition.
Right.
They destroyed the Colt tradition.
They did, and that's one thing. Listen, Art Modell was a great friend to me, and I don't think he'll ever be given the proper credit for what he did for the National Football League. He's one of the creators of Monday Night Football. He did not want to leave his hometown of Cleveland for Baltimore, but the city there screwed up, and he did what he had to do while, to your point, leaving the team, the logo, the colors, etc. And then they did get a team a few years later. The Irsay family took, obviously, the Baltimore Colts, took them to Indianapolis, and we know what happened there. That's why I like this with the Chicago Bears. They're still going to be the Chicago Bears, even though they're in Hammond, Indiana, which is not a luxurious place to go visit. I mean, that part of Indiana, the region near Gary, economically, it's been going downhill for real decades here. So it's kind of cool to see some improvements coming to northern Indiana. And Governor Mike Braun, they're treating it the right way. And I think that's the part that it's hard from an emotional fan perspective, but the business perspective makes sense, and they still will be the Chicago Bears, just like the Giants and the Jets are, despite where they play.
All right, okay. You called me a socialist because I don't like, and how much the owners give, because I love tradition. I know you were, but I love the tradition. But here's another thing that bothers me. You know, it's like, yes, they have a right to make as much money, and it is a business. You're absolutely right. But the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, makes over $60 million a year. You know, and so he's chosen by the owners, and it begins to, for me, like it sort of takes the fun out of it when I see people, you know, scrambling, you know, and you know, showing up at the stadiums with their jerseys and everything, and the tickets are so expensive and everything, you know, and then the team moves to another state. You know, at some point it just, you know, it doesn't seem so fun anymore. You know, the business stuff does poison the fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. And trust me, that's one of the reasons right now that I loved my 30 years in the sports industry, but now I'm able to be just a fan. And it's weird. It's crazy to put the business stuff aside. I think that's kind of what you have to do. And it's just like anything else in any other industry where you have your feelings hurt here or there, but at the end of the day, there's leadership, there's money involved, and those leaders are going to do what they feel is best. And I mean, you can look at James Dolan. I mean, how long have people hated James Dolan there in New York, right? Because of bad business decisions. And at the end of the day, now everybody loves him. And guess what's happened to the value of the New York Knicks in the last couple of days? I mean, it has skyrocketed, and he's going to make more money. But New Yorkers are okay with that. Why? Because they got their championship. No one complains when they're winning, and I think that's the key.
I think actually it's very true. Anyway, Sage Steele, always nice to see you. Thank you. And a reminder to the viewers, check out the Sage Steele podcast. It's on YouTube, Apple, and other platforms. Thank you very much, Greta. Sage. And are you planning to fly into Washington, D.C. for the 4th? If you are, you better check your tickets right now. That's because of this big surprise. No flights are scheduled at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport after 12 p.m. Eastern Time on the 4th. The Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority said that they are closing the runways because of aerial rehearsals, performances, and fireworks. They will also be closed on July 3rd for several hours in the early afternoon, but that's not all. The runways will be temporarily closed this coming Wednesday and Thursday for the opening of the Great American State Fair, and then also closed on Sunday, June 28th for Military Appreciation Day. But that's not all. Runways will be closed on Friday, July 10th for the closeout flyover, the Great American State Fair, and of course, there is more. Runways will be closed again on August 22nd and 23rd for the Grand Prix race near the National Mall. So get your train tickets or get on the Greyhound if you're coming here. Coming up, what are former presidents Barack Obama, Joe Biden, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton doing together, and why isn't President Trump there? One last random question. If you had a garden, what would you name it? That when the record continues.
Greg Kelly over at Newsmax. The Newsmax people have been really, really terrific. Newsmax has been terrific.
President Trump is right. Millions are watching Newsmax and Greg Kelly. Tune in tonight.
Average price for a gallon of gas?
It's gonna blow!
$4.43.
That's extortion.
Price for Paramount Plus? 99 cents per month for the first 2 months.
That sounds like a good deal.
You ready?
I love it.
Lots of other prices may be crazy, but ours is not.
It's my home.
The Paramount Plus Summer Sale. Just 99 cents per month for the first 2 months.
When you're ready to raise the bar on HR, we've got you. That's Bambooable. When compliance feels like, rocket science, that's Bambooable too. And when persnickety payroll puts you in a panic, even that's Bambooable. Because Bamboo HR means competition outdoable, regulations reviewable, paying your crewable, barriers breakthroughable, the impossible can doable, all built for you-able. That's Bambooable. That's Bamboo HR.
I'm former Mets manager Terry Collins. The Tunnel Towers Foundation is very important to me, and I look for ways to try to support them any way I can. If a first responder is killed in the line of duty, T2T will pay off the mortgage for their family. That's just one of the ways T2T makes a difference. You can support their cause as well by donating $11 a month. Go to T2T.org, let's go Mets, and let's help Tunnel Towers.
I'm Elmer Heinrich, at 92 years of age with my wife Shirley, who is 83. Now, both of us are still cutting a wide swath in life, all because of Immuno 150. Now, we are asking you to use Immuno 150 like we do. Give it a chance for at least 90 days so that you can see what 70 plant minerals and 80 additional nutrients can do for you.
It really is incredible.
Don't place your order until after you've watched the 3 videos on our website.
There's no way a mouthwash can prevent bad breath for 12 hours.
You're right, Val. Mouthwash can't, but this is dentist-developed Smart Mouth Activated Mouthwash.
Activated?
Yeah, if your mouthwash isn't activated, it's not Smart Mouth. See, this plus this activate for 12 hours of bad breath prevention, guaranteed. Try it. You won't have bad breath in the morning. Good night, Val.
Get Dentist Developed Smart Mouth today. It's the smarter mouthwash, available at these fine retailers.
Booking private used to be a gamble. Not with Fly USA. It's flying where you want, when you want, stress-free. A US-based concierge will provide real options, fast. Find any size jet, anywhere, with transparent pricing and 5-star service. No matter business or pleasure, let Fly USA elevate your travel. Fly like a pro with Fly USA. Book your first flight at flyusa.com and use promo code USA for up to $5,000 off.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dry premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and it's available at your local pet store.
A big day in Chicago. It is the opening of the Obama Presidential Center. And today, 4 former presidents, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, were all sitting together. These former presidents were last together in the same room last year for Jimmy Carter's funeral. And today, it was not a funeral, but the opening of the huge Obama facility. It's 19 acres. And besides the library, it also has a basketball court and a garden named after former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. The cost of this whole center, $850 million. For point of reference, Clinton's in Little Rock, Arkansas, was $165 million, and George W. Bush's library in Dallas, Texas, was $250 million. Correspondent Sarah Williamson is in Chicago. Sarah.
Hey, Greta. Well, look, it was long awaited, but the Obama Presidential Center is now officially opened, with the president addressing the crowd today, the former president, I should say, saying that he hopes the facility affirms just how important democracy really is, whilst also speaking about the importance of having it here down in Southside Chicago. Take a listen.
For me, this center could not be anyplace else. It's an expression of thanks, an acknowledgement that so much of what I hold most dear, I owe to the people of this city and the people of these surrounding neighborhoods.
Now, the privately funded campus sits here in Chicago's Jackson Park. It features a museum dedicated to Obama's presidency, and as you mentioned, a public library, athletics facilities, gardens, playgrounds, and multiple event spaces. But unlike previous presidential libraries, the center will not house Obama's official paper records. Instead, they're being preserved digitally by the National Archives, making it the nation's first fully digital presidential library. But the grand opening ceremony also brought together, as you mentioned, all the former living presidents except for one, President Trump. There was also an influential mix of political leaders and celebrities among the crowd, including actors Anne Hathaway and Tom Hanks. But we also had multiple performances as well, with artists such as John Legend, Bono, and Bruce Springsteen.
What a house. What a wonder. They're calling it the Obama list at home, just so you know.
Now, the centre opens to the public on Friday to mark Juneteenth, though general admission tickets to the library are already sold out until November. The opening also comes with some controversy, though, as several subcontractors claim they are still owed millions of dollars for work on the project after years of construction delays and rising costs. The Obama Foundation says that it fulfilled its contractual obligations by paying the project's general contractor, which is responsible for paying the subcontractors. But although the ceremony was private today, there was still some 1,000 people inside, with also thousands of people in the public nearby at a watch party. But the Obama Foundation says that this facility is expected to bring in over 1 million people into the area each and every single year, therefore bringing a lot of revenue to the community here as well. Greta?
Sarah, any idea how much those tickets are to go look at this museum, to walk through it?
To get in, I'm not so sure because we weren't able to actually sign up for some, but the ones that were on sale today for the watch party, they quickly snapped up and they were actually free. So there were people here who were disappointed that they weren't able to get their hands on one. But for how much those tickets are, that's still unsure because they were only available up until November. So we have to wait for new ones to be released.
Sarah Williamson, thank you. And another landmark has been catching attention. This one is in our nation's capital. The Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool recently turned green. President Trump has ordered a new paint job, so in April the pool was drained. Then it was painted American flag blue, and in June the pool was refilled, but shortly after that the pool turned green. What happened? Algae. So the Interior Department took on the case. It ordered a filter. It also ordered some vacuums. And now the Interior Department says on X, quote, "The reflecting pool water is crystal clear, and our National Park Service team is now vacuuming the dead algae resting on the bottom of some parts of the reflecting pool, just like the destroyed Iranian Navy resting on the bottom of the Persian Gulf," end quote. Coming up, a plot to attack the White House with armed drones and snipers. Now the feds have arrested an alleged ringleader. Why is this guy smiling? He has a nasty rap sheet. Find out when the record continues.
Tonight's Newsmax lineup is brought to you by Crown Atlantic. Protect what matters most with fast, affordable life insurance. Visit lifeforless.com.
How was school today? It was good. They want to cast me as the lead in the school play.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Are you gonna do it? You okay? Honey?
Do you want to talk about it, Daddy?
Yeah.
Some wireless companies say that they stand for something. What exactly do they stand for, and why won't they say it out loud? Let me tell you what Patriot Mobile stands for. They stand for the lives of the unborn. They stand for the Second Amendment and the right to protect yourself and your family. They stand for our veterans and first responders who sacrifice so much for our freedom. Make the switch to Patriot Mobile today and support a company that doesn't just say they stand for something, but one that stands for the things that matter the most.
The name's Hampton. I've come a long way from my Humpty days and have learned a thing or two about crashes and falls. That's why I invest with Willow Wealth. They make it easy to diversify my portfolio with private markets. Plus, portfolios including private markets have outperformed traditional ones for the past 20 years. Not that it's a competition. Diversify your portfolio to help rise above public market volatility and level up your game. Those who know, know. Willow Wealth.
Nobody knows Corvettes like McMulkin Chevrolet, the world's largest Corvette dealer for 5 consecutive years. Set apart by its name alone, Corvette delivers a legacy of American craftsmanship, and a vehicle that sets the bar for performance cars deserves a buying experience that beats it. With hundreds of Corvettes in stock and ready for immediate delivery nationwide, it's no wonder Corvette enthusiasts from across the USA keep coming back to McMulkin Chevrolet.
Healthy aging support starts here with the innovative nitric oxide science pioneered by Human, supporting your body from the heart out through circulation, blood flow, blood pressure, and energy. Results you can feel, science you can trust. Get started today at human.com.
What if you're sick at home or traveling and can't get medical help or prescriptions? Doctors say a medical emergency kit is the answer. Joining me is Dr. Drew.
Thank you. And yes, these kits put you in charge of your health. They come with physician-prescribed medication to treat multiple common and some serious issues as well.
What are some examples?
Sure. Generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other essential antibiotics and antivirals that treat flu, pneumonia, strep, ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, and more.
So it is like urgent care and a pharmacy at home?
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
How do you know what medicines to take?
You just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Sound advice. Order online in minutes at the website below and save $45. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
New information about the planned terror attack at the UFC event last Sunday at the White House. The Department of Homeland Security says the alleged ringleader is a Mexican citizen who is currently living in the United States illegally. DHS adds that Abraham Hermosillo Alvarez came to the United States as a minor. In 2001, he overstayed his B-2 visitor visa. In 2014, under the Obama administration, he was granted deferred action for childhood arrivals. According to a criminal complaint, the first suspect, Tyson Proper, who was arrested in Ohio over the weekend after his mother turned him in, told officials that Alvarez, who used the alias Shepard, was the leader of the group. Earlier today, DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen spoke to Newsmax about the arrest. Here's what he said.
This could have got a lot worse, but as I said, it never got to the point of actually delivery. It was just aspirational. But this was still, once again, an illegal immigrant that shouldn't be in this country that was trying to kill innocent individuals. And every single death that is at the hands of an illegal was 100 and is 100% preventable because they should never be in this country to begin with.
Alvarez and 4 other co-conspirators are now in custody. Each defendant faces a maximum penalty of life in prison and a $250,000 fine. And federal judge Eleanor Ross is back in the news. She was disciplined, as you know, by the United States Court of Appeals for having sex in her chambers with a high-ranking police officer. And now she's back in the news because she is recusing herself from the Georgia voter rolls case. According to her decision, Judge Ross is recusing herself because in 2024, she attended a political event for Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. Willis is the DA who prosecuted President Trump after the 2020 election. Her order reads in part, quote, out of an abundance of caution for the potential perception of bias, the undersigned will disqualify herself from further proceedings in this case, end quote. An assistant attorney general for the Department of Justice says, quote, glad to see that our specific legal arguments and common sense prevailed in this motion, end quote. Former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Jay Town, joins me. And Jay, a little bit of different twist on it that seems to be, at least as far as I can see, lacking, is that she didn't all of a sudden say, I'm going to disqualify myself because I recognize this. She was asked to disqualify herself by the Department of Justice because of perceived bias.
Yeah, and she was asked multiple times, and then they had to make a formal recusal motion. And she had a Monday deadline, this Monday. And what Harmeet Dillon, the AAG for Civil Rights, who is leading the lawsuit into the election records in Georgia, she said, you have until Monday night, and or else we're going to go to the 11th Circuit. Well, for the reasons you mentioned in your read-in, she doesn't want her name in front of the 11th Circuit again. Because she was just sanctioned by the 11th Circuit for lying to the Chief Judge of the Northern District of Georgia and the Chief Judge of the 11th Circuit about the affair she was having in her chambers. So this is, Eleanor Ross, an Obama appointee, who barely admits in this recusal order that she even really knows Fani Willis that well and didn't know it was a political event. Everything that Fani Willis did, we covered her for years, Greta, you did rather, and were kind enough to have me on to talk about her. Everything she does is political, to include the event she attended.
Well, the other day when we were on about it, I said the thing that didn't bother me about the things that, about her behavior being disciplined by the U.S., the 11th Circuit, but you disagreed with me. It was about this whole thing with going to Fani Willis. I didn't realize at the time, and you were right about this, that the underlying case had to do with voter rolls. I just thought that it was just any case having to do with their office. So you were, I mean, I've come to agree with you. You're absolutely right on that. I just didn't know the facts. But the lawsuit they're doing, the federal lawsuit is seeking access to Georgia's voter rolls, and I suppose to see if there are any problems with them, whether dead people on them or whatever.
Yeah, and you'll recall that Fulton County had its 2020 ballots seized not too long ago. We talked about that on your show. What I don't understand, Greta, and maybe you can help me understand, is why these states are fighting so hard against the Department of Justice from allowing them just to look at their voter rolls. Alabama said, yeah, sure, come on in. We'll give you an entire gymnasium if you want to look at who's on our voter rolls to make sure that they live in the state of Alabama, that they are alive, that they are legal, and they are registered voters. A lot of states have complied. It just seems like these states that are anti-Trump, and Georgia is increasingly becoming an anti-Trump state, at least in its sort of governing principles. They're Republican, but the governor and lieutenant governor and some others just don't like Trump. Fani Willis definitely doesn't like Trump. So I'm glad that Harmeet Dillon and DOJ is pursuing this.
Well, it's not just Georgia, as you know, it's other states. Is that according to my research, there are 30 states where the Department of Justice is saying, let's just look at your rules. I mean, look, chances are on any rules, there might be some that inure to the benefit of the Democrats, some inure to the benefit of the Republicans, but we should at least periodically have a second set of eyes to look at these voter rolls to make sure that there is nothing imperfect about them, as much as we can try to get perfection in them. And it is rather interesting that the states are fighting this, because what's the big deal?
Yeah, and remember, there's so many of these states have mail-in ballots that are just automatically sent to, like California, like I believe Oregon and Washington as well, that are among those 30 you meant that are not giving the rolls up. And so those ballots just get mailed out. Well, if they're being mailed to dead people, or people don't live there anymore in that state, or they're not legal residents, well, then those are ballots that somebody else can cast. A homeless person can cast, on who's not even registered to vote. So it's critical that these rolls are clean, and DOJ is doing a wonderful job ensuring that we get clean rolls before the 2028 election. Doesn't look like we're going to know about that before the midterms this year, though, Greta.
And just to throw in something random, I'm going to take the last one now, is Judge Eleanor Ross lied about the investigation, and now she has people before her who are looking up at the bench and seeing, and she's, questioning whether they're lying. And of course, she's, she's got a little problem. Jay Town, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Greta.
Coming up, guess where crime-busting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, found a crack cocaine ring. That when the record continues.
If you think your out-of-warranty car will last forever, you need to wake up. Are you okay with spending thousands on car repairs? That cuts into grocery money, vacation funds, you name it. When an unexpected breakdown happens, that covered repair will get paid for you. The right plan for me is a Car Shield plan, and that goes for you too.
Car repair prices are only getting more expensive. With a Car Shield plan, you can protect up to 5,000 parts and systems and drive worry-free with America's most trusted auto protection. There are no long-term contracts, and Car Shield has plans for every budget. Best of all, the rate you get today is your rate for as long as you cover your car.
Over the years, Car Shield has saved our customers thousands of dollars, which allows us to keep our customers' vehicles safe and keep them moving down the road.
Like I say, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And Car Shield's been showing up for their customers for over 20 years. Not only can they help save you thousands on repairs, but their additional benefits can save you even more. Like 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, and rental car options. That's why I don't drive without Car Shield.
Car Shield gives our family peace of mind. It gives us comfort knowing that we're not going to be hit with major car expenses, and it saved me over $13,000.
When a breakdown happens, Car Shield can help you find a repair shop in your area, pay the shop directly, and get you on your way. Saving money is as easy as call, drive, save.
Okay, America, here's your chance to outsmart the universe and call Car Shield before that expensive breakdown happens. Life's a marathon, not a sprint. Make sure you cross the finish line. Pick up that phone and see how much money Car Shield can help you save.
Car Shield has saved drivers more than $1 billion in car repairs. How much could they save you? Find out today when you call and get your free quote. Call 800-471-1654. 800-471-1654. 800-471-1654.
It's me, Ricky. You grew up with me. I am using Fatty 15 to get me to feel and look the best I've ever felt at my age. The C15 nutrient has been known to strengthen our cells and slow the aging process at a cellular level. I urge you to try Fatty 15.
Relay gives us visibility into
not just the amount of money we have, but the work that it's doing. And it gives us something to build toward without so much of the financial anxiety that we had before.
Think you need a new roof? Think again. Most roofing companies only make money one way, by selling you a new roof. But what if your roof isn't worn out, just dried out? And with just a little love, you could put off an expensive roof replacement for up to 15 years, at a fraction of the cost of a new roof. Roofmax is a scientifically engineered restoration formula that brings your shingle life back to new. Scan the code and get a free roof tune-up with your Roofmax restoration.
Grim discovery in South Carolina. On News Story we have been reporting. Police say they have recovered a body that matches a missing personal trainer's description. Elena Catherine Moore was last seen a week ago leaving a Planet Fitness gym in Lexington, South Carolina. According to surveillance footage, the 39-year-old trainer was wearing an olive green zip-up hoodie and black athletic pants. Police say the body that was found was wearing similar clothes. The body was also found near the Planet Fitness gym where Moore was last seen leaving. Coroner has not made an official identification. Police did not comment on whether they suspect foul play or not, but Moore's husband is not regarded as a person of interest. Yesterday, we debuted our Soundbite Shuffle. So today, what are the bites grabbing our attention and something you may have missed? Today, it's NATO, crime, and maybe a new friendship, and perhaps a bizarre one.
For too long, NATO has been a paper tiger and a one-way street. No more. And that's what the Hague Summit is all about. That's what defense spending commitments are all about, transforming NATO back into a real military alliance that's focused on hard power and real deterrence, a NATO 3.0.
It's one thing to have a prosecution of dirtbags who were selling drugs in the area of schools 1,000 feet from a damn elementary school. It's a whole other level of crime as far as I'm concerned for this woman to bring a child to a cocaine sale and then walk along with the child while she's got the drugs on her.
Joy Behar is way tougher than the Iranians, and she and I are best friends now.
Vice President J.D. Vance saying that he and his View co-host Joy Behar are now best friends. Well, on Tuesday, Vance was on The View. Guess he made a good impression with her. She is certainly not known for being gracious. Coming up, the Brits tried to burn down our White House in 1814, and now what are they up to? That when the record continues.
When you're in the news business, it never stops. News is always breaking, and it's my job to get you the news, no spin, no BS. If you don't believe us, just watch us.
Watch Finity, weeknights, only on Newsmax.
Life with ear ringing sounded like a constant train whistle I couldn't escape. Then I started taking lipoflavonoid. With 60 years of clinical experience, it's the #1 doctor-recommended brand for ear ringing, and now I'm finally free. Take back control with lipoflavonoid.
Stop. Check this out. Our most advanced performance frame, Talon, is out. It's a bestseller. We just got it back in stock, and I want to show you a little bit about it. These come with our signature lost and broken protection, and you can try them risk-free for 30 days. Check them out at shadyrays.com.
Doctors say having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care and pharmacy at home. Let me bring in Dr. McCullough to explain more.
Most people know when they're getting sick, but waiting to see a doctor is often too late.
So the key is having medicines before you need them.
Yes, and it includes doctor-prescribed medicines to treat common and serious issues like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, antibiotics, antivirals for flu, pneumonia, strep, ear and sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
So it is like having an urgent care at home.
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications and hospitalizations.
How do you know what to take?
Just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Great advice. I understand ordering is fast online, and we've put the website and $45 off code on the screen. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
I'm Elmer Heinrich, at 92 years of age with my wife Shirley, who is 83. Now, both of us are still cutting a wide swath in life, all because of Immuno 150. Now, we are asking you to use Amino 150 like we do. Give it a chance for at least 90 days so that you can see what 70 plant minerals and 80 additional nutrients can do for you.
It really is incredible.
Don't place your order until after you've watched the 3 videos on our website.
Febreze.
Why do we rely on a Febreze cabin air filter? I'll show you. Ooh, sour.
Best but dirtiest co-pilot. Gotta love rush hour.
Advanced PureFlow technology eliminates nasty cabin odors while trapping 99% of harmful pollutants and maximizes airflow.
Smartest way to fresh, odorless air is as simple as Febreze, right, bud?
Try an unscented Febreze cabin air filter powered by PureFlow. Go to pureflowair.com.
The agency is cleaning house.
This is a mole hunt.
Trust no one. Not even me. Were you asked to look into me?
And if I was?
This isn't a fishing trip. This is a manhunt, killer capture. You're hunting a predator. Miss the kill shot. It comes for you.
Satellite internet that's fast, reliable, and installed by professionals. For work, for play, for every day. Available anywhere you call home. Visit Viasat.com/internet now or call 833-8Viasat to sign up today.
Steak is for dads, grill dads, tongue-snapping dads, united by their love of steak. His perfect gift is waiting, plus 8 free burgers. Get it in time for Father's Day at omahasteaks.com.
Now to the White House. President Trump is about to award the highest military decoration. It's the Medal of Honor. Receiving the award are 2 Vietnam vets who came under enemy fire and 1 Afghanistan vet who fought the Taliban.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.